For Taylor Swift and for fans alike, last night was truly the ending of an era, the ending of the Eras Tour era. Now, I don't necessarily think it was wholly the ending of the era, and we'll get to that in a second, because I think there is a lot of things still to come related to the Eras Tour. But for a lot of us, it is the end of coming together on an almost weekly basis, sometimes 3-4 times a week, to see what Taylor is up to see what the surprise songs are, to see what the outfits are. Even if we didn't spend the entire 3.5 hours watching a grainy little live stream, many of us at one point in time during the tour or another checked in on those grainy little live streams to see what Taylor was up to. And it really has brought many of us together in a way that I really haven't experienced in many, many years. It is often said amongst critics that there is very little of a cultural monolith anymore. There are very few things that, like, all of us, or like most of us, go through together. This felt like a rare recurrence of that, and it hasn't been since like those first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, which I don't even think Game of Thrones was ever this big. Like, I don't remember the last time I have participated in a cultural phenomenon that was this large. And it has been so important in my life. I think one of the reasons that Taylor has sung "You're on Your Own, Kid" so many times is because so many of us were like the weird little kid who didn't necessarily have a lot of friends when we were growing up because our interests weren't the same as the kids around us. A lot of us were the awkward, shy kid who just wanted to make music or wanted to draw or wanted to pursue some sort of passion that was artistic. And that made it hard sometimes for us to interface with our peers. And I have met so many other people like me on this journey, on this Eras Tour journey. Like, when I really started getting invested in Taylor was specifically when Red Taylor's version came out. I have not been a long-term fan, and I have only been like making content about Taylor for like the past 1.5 years. I have only been like fully invested in this for a short period of time, and yet it's so weird to realize that I'm not going to be logging on this weekend and guessing what the outfits and the songs and stuff are going to be, and interpreting all of the meanings behind everything and the symbolism with my peers. Except I do think we will be. I think one of the things that fascinates me the most about the Eras Tour is how it was in like a lion and out like a lamb. So many of us were expecting this big explosion of change, of something different to happen these last 3. We thought these last 3 Eras Tour dates were going to be something like wildly different, or at least it was going to be something that cracked open the shell of what was to come in Taylor, in her artistic future and in her personal future. But at the same token, it really seems like Taylor, for her final bow out of Eras Tour, has wanted to preserve it as it was, like at its final moment, like as it was when she brought it together into its final form with TTBD added and with these mashups added towards the end. A lot of this seems about preserving the moment. Taylor had so many cameras and all of these sorts of things following her around, and I can only assume that A, we're going to have another Eras Tour, the movie, coming, like with the TTBD set added and everything like that, which I'm very excited for because I really want to be able to compare and contrast the two. Second, I do think it's very likely that we're going to get some sort of making of documentary about this. Logistics videos are incredibly popular right now. Videos by channels such as Wendover Productions / Has It Interesting, like a lot of those things are very interesting. A lot of me and my friends have been really wondering what the logistics of this tour was, especially because I don't think enough people realize how challenging some of the song mashups were for Taylor. Like, I think because she wrote all of those songs, a lot of people think, oh yeah, no, she can just slap them together and it's fine. No, she's sung all of those songs 1,000,000 times. But often, like, when you have done something 1,000,000 times like that, that makes it a little bit harder to play it a little bit different. Like, some of her songs she had to play in different keys, in different tempos. She had to move like 2 or 3 songs to a shared tempo or a shared key so that they can interact properly together, so it doesn't sound completely like butt. And she has done that so marvelously, and I think that those mashups all tell such important tales, and I think now that we finally have like all of them together, maybe I will finally I often joke that there is just too much. Like, Taylor is putting too much symbolism and meaning and puzzles out into this world, and like I really have to force myself to only focus on specific little areas of the artistic whole at a time, or else I get overwhelmed by how much of it is. Like I said, I didn't really start taking a lot of this seriously until Red Taylor's version. A lot of this has been onboarding a lot of information. I've had a lot of different albums really quickly, and then having all of that information information get swirled in a blender when Taylor released TTPD and really started to like break apart a lot of those things. And I think one of the reasons why people are so upset about the loss of the Eras Tour is not just because it was one thing that brought us together with the segment of the fandom that we identified with the most. It's also the fact that I think a lot of people realize that I think it's going to be hard for Taylor to even do something that is this big again. Like, it is insane the amount of effort and the amount of focus and the amount of things that she has needed to set aside in order to do a 3.5-hour marathon of a tour every night. The one thing that has fascinated me the most is all of these professional athletes, Olympic athletes, people that are very physically fit, who go to the Eras Tour and see what Taylor does and watch all of the things that she does, and they're like, I don't know how she does it every night. Because she is not only performing a little theater kid's heart out, she's also running a marathon while she's doing it and looking perfect while she's doing it. Something that I commented with about my friends, because we often joke about the fact that, the red Reputation outfit was probably old Stinky. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, God, it stunk, because there was this belief that there was only one of them. I believe otherwise. I believe most of the outfits had duplicates and triplicates, but otherwise there was this idea that maybe these outfits were Stinky. And I'm like, well, honestly, a lot of times, like, when have you ever seen her really, like, she only ever looked wet when it was raining a lot. She very often looks completely perfectly put together while she's doing this. It is insane the amount of effort that goes into not only doing something like this, but also making it look easy. We talk about like how hard it must be to get in the Reputation outfit because it is so skin tight and she has such a small window of time to do it. And as I'm sure all of you know, it is harder to get into and out of garments when you and or the garment is sweaty. So like, it's fascinating to us, just even the basic simple mechanics of how all of this works. I actually had to journal for a little bit because I had very big feelings like right before Taylor went on. So I journaled this while I was listening to Gracie. Not gonna lie, I'm really anxious about the last night of Eras Tour. It has an equal likelihood to be nothing as it does to be everything. Tomorrow morning, everything in the fandom may be the same, or it could all be fundamentally changed. And that has felt like the state of the fandom for so long now. But also, like, Taylor has been our guiding light for so long now. There have been so many days where we have had something awful happen and we've been like, all right, I'm having a really bad day, but at least I can watch the Eras Tour stream tonight. Like, she has been a guiding light for so many of us that were going through things. And a lot of us that went through like periods of healing after listening to TTPD because we realized that we had been through many of the same things that Taylor had been through, and that made us like deconstruct our lives and look at who we were and how we had become those people. And like, I know so many women, especially women that are from my generation, from the millennial generation, and women who are even older, who have listened to Taylor's music and have deconstructed Taylor's music and have learned so many things about their own lives. And why Taylor is so inseparable from my own life is because I really noticed a lot of the themes of Taylor abandoning this, like, trying to be appealing to men, trying to be appealing to the cis heteronormativity with her work. No deal that 1950s shit they want from me. All of these things where she's resisting this idea of like one night or a bride, where she wants to reframe her life as something else, where she doesn't want to necessarily be known for who she's dating and things like that. And she doesn't like the fact that very often her music is just constantly brought back to like the men. So often also her work is about herself and so many of the deep struggles that she's been through. If this is a new concept to you, I've done a ton of videos on it, especially my videos on TTPD. But I think it is so important to realize that it seems like, and why I think so many people feel like this is such a bigger issue than just the tour ending, is because it feels like an era of Taylor continuing to really try to appeal to that large of a fan base, to be as appealing as possible to as many people as possible, which requires her to put on this facade that a lot of us call Taylor Swift the brand, Taylor Swift TM, this facade of the perfectly perfected pop princess that, everything that she does is, her poo doesn't stink, she doesn't pass gas, like all of these things that, like, all of these weird ideals that we have for women, that they must be perfect all of the time, that they can never have an error, that they can never have a moment of weakness. A lot of values that are placed on women are values that Taylor, like, has to embody to a higher degree. And something that struck me is Taylor has this way of leaving us wanting more. She has this way of like giving us more than what we thought we wanted, but also at the same time not giving us as much as she possibly can, and that leaves us wanting. And I thought about that in the context of like, and the crowd was chanting more, and I think it's like really this two-way relationship, right? She is incredibly good at leaving us wanting more, at just giving us the barest fragments of the ideas of what she's trying to tell, the stories that she's trying to tell, leaving us to put together the puzzle on our own. And because of that, like, she really leaves us wanting more sometimes, and that is how she manages to keep us continually listening to her music and things like that. I think one thing that is really smart about the way that she chose to end Eras Tour in like trying to preserve it in like its normal form rather than trying to do some special blowout and change it in the last minute is like, she really has left us wanting more. She has really left us in a situation where if she releases a box set that is a bunch of DVDs of the whole performance and all of the songs that she did acoustic sets of and all of the mashups, if she releases a box set of that in 2 weeks, we are going to be positively feral for it. And I think that that's probably something that we are very likely to see, if not immediately in the future, then over the course of the next year or so. I think that we're going to see more and more content released from the Eras Tour contingent on that nostalgia, playing back to that moment, that shared moment that we all had together. And I think one of the things that I really want a lot of people to understand, like, if your big focus, if the big reason that you came into Eras Tour and that you came to these streams every night is because it was a form of friendship that you had never really experienced before, coming together for a musician, like listening to everything that they have to say, analyzing their art, all of those things, there are tons of smaller musicians that have incredible communities surrounding them that maybe there's not as many people involved as the Swifties, but also maybe the people involved are more personally like you than Taylor Swift's fandom. I have been very invested in Frances Whitney. She has an incredible community that we're kind of working on forming, and the great thing about supporting an artist that is newer and their fan scene is smaller and less put together and less like assembled is that you can really start to form what that's going to look like. You can form the connections and make the bonds that determine what that fandom looks like. I mentioned You're on Your Own Kid earlier, and I think that there is so much in Taylor's art and in the Eras Tour that appeals to that like inner lonely kid, like I said. And I think encouraging us to make friendship bracelets and like pointedly to get over our embarrassment or our shame that might have been, you know, imparted in us because, oh, silly friendship bracelets are for kids, you know, toys are for kids. Having physical things that attach you to things that you like fandom culture, is very often looked down upon in our culture. But I know that for me personally, having physical manifestations of things that I love and things that are important to me are like, it's just so important. This is a time that I went to the National Aquarium in Baltimore and I had an incredible time. I have so many of Mariah Elizabeth's plushies because she is someone that has really impacted me as a creator. I have this Finch plushie because the Finch app has been incredible in my mental healing. I think this understanding that like physical tokens and trinkets are not uncool and they're not just for kids, and you can do this. And I love how I've seen this spread to so many more fandoms. I love how it's normalized, and I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, all of the plastic trash, all of the waste, but I don't think they realize how many people, like, this isn't becoming plastic trash. It's not becoming waste. A lot of people do wear their friendship bracelets every day or every time they go to a Swiftie event. A lot of people use them as decorations in their homes, in their, like, studio backdrops, if they're content creators, things like that. And they are physical manifestations of those moments, those memories, those things that they shared with other people. And having these things, having these physical reminders of times when I was happy, when I was surrounded with other people, as somebody who struggles with my mental health, I think it's incredibly important. And I am so grateful to Taylor and You're on Your Own Kid and just this concept of friendship bracelets, of having these little ephemeral tokens of the places and the people and the things that we've done and we've seen and we've experienced in a world when so many awful things are happening, when there are so many constant reminders of how bad things can be and the worst parts of the world and everything that we don't want to think about in the world. It is so nice to just have this plushie that reminds me of somebody else that I know cares for me, you know? And journaling as well. Like, I keep talking about making a series where I just like talk about the habits and the hobbies that I've gotten from celebrities and how they've impacted my life. And one of the biggest things that I've gotten from Taylor, yes, but also from a lot of other successful people, is journaling. Like, journaling is so critically important to understanding and processing the thoughts and not forgetting things that you might have that are good creative ideas. Like, I was probably just forgetting 27 video ideas a day because I wouldn't write them down because I would assume that I would remember them. And then when I would sit down and make a video, I'd be like, do I have anything that I need to talk about? I'm just going to go briefly into the surprise songs. The surprise songs, each of them, I could probably talk about for hours at a time. Unfortunately, I don't know how many people actually care, especially now that the tour is over. So let me know down in the comments. As for the specific surprise song mashups, I will probably do additional videos on that, especially because I do not know a lot about A Place in This World. I know it's one of her very early songs, but as a fan, it's not something that has come up much in my research before, so I really want to dig into that specifically. But New Romantics is such an important song, and one that I've discussed a lot of times before, right? Because the New Romantics obviously is harkening back on two things. First off, the original Romantics, so the Romantic poets, you know, Take Me to the Lakes Where All the Poets Came to Die, Wordsworth, you know, all of those people that Taylor very much looks up to. These were artists who realized they can influence and progress society through their own artwork more than they ever could via lecturing people or trying to tell people what to do. The New Romantics of the 1980s were people like Boy George from Culture Club and David Bowie. They were people who, again, they tried to progress what we thought was normal in society, often using a lot of gender bending and like kind of queer adjacent imagery and symbolism. And a lot of those performers we now know were to some degree or another secretly queer. And it's very interesting to me how often Taylor consistently is interacting with queer people in history in her art. It's like whenever she has a chance to choose a historical figure, she always chooses the one that's not beating the allegations. And I know a lot of people are constantly like, Taylor Swift needs to talk out more. She has such of a platform. She needs to be speaking more. She needs to tell people what to do. Like, we know, obviously, from the election that when Taylor tells people, hey, this is what I think you should do, that doesn't get people to listen. People are very reluctant. They don't want to be lectured to. But what does work, and what I've seen people go through again and again and again, I have seen people slowly realize that the way that they have centered men in their lives and have deprioritized their own needs and have been people pleasers because they thought it was the only option for them, because they thought it was the best option for them. I have seen so many people deconstruct these hazardous norms and pursue who and what they wanted to be, the identities that they had wanted to seek since birth. There are so many people that I know as a queer fan of Taylor who are also queer and who realized that they were queer through listening to Taylor's music. I am one of them. Like, so much of like Folklore and Evermore and Midnights and even into TTPD was me realizing that like there were so many things that I had only done in life because it was what it was expected of me. And even after I had people pleased until my back basically broke, like hyperbolically broken, not literally broken, like I worked until my back broke and I did all of the things that I had been told to do. I prioritized my career, but I still made sure I was dating men that had good jobs and, you know, seemed respectable and were from good family, all of the things that I was told that if I do these things that I will be happy, safe, and successful. But then what I noticed was that I was never happy. I never felt safe. And in the absence of happiness and safety, it's very difficult to feel like you're successful at anything. And it was really like being forced to not date. Ironically, getting a bird who took up so much of my time that I didn't really have a lot of time to date, that I really started looking into like listening to music more and thinking about the meanings and remembering that when I was in high school, I loved doing book reports and other like media analysis. I went to college for film analysis, and it really made me remember that like we act like people that just like criticize media on the internet are not doing anything very important, but like I have learned so much through Taylor Swift's art, but more specifically through the people who point out the themes and the symbolism and all of that jazz from Taylor Swift's art. There are so many intricate references. There are so many figures in history that she's constantly mentioning in a variety of different ways. I've been exposed to so many other queer artists. The large majority of people that she invites on her stage as openers are openly queer, and many of them are sliding slowly out of the closet, I would argue. to. New Romantics is so important about the symbolism of what Taylor wants to do with her art, what she wants to make more acceptable through her art. I talk about mantra theory. I talk about the power that words have when we sing them and we shout them over and over and over again in front of thousands of other people. When we say F the patriarchy, when we say no deal, that 1950s shit they want from me, I believe they fundamentally alter us through that repetition in a way that is incredibly empowering. Then we had the piano. Long live New Year's Day, the Manuscript. I do have a full video coming on the Manuscript because I have a great many thoughts about it. I think it is a very important key to understanding and decoding TTPD as an album. The Manuscript. It is very important to everything. It is an instruction of how to listen to the album. I think it allows people to sync up the album with the movie Dead Poets Society, which I think is an intended bit of synchronicity that Taylor has intended for TTPD to be a soundtrack for Dead Poets Society, because I feel like a lot of the feelings and emotions that are expressed in Dead Poets Society are things that Taylor can relate to. I think it's a way of her expressing herself about certain feelings that have been trapped up that she maybe can't express so directly because of the image that people have of her and her family and her relationships and things like that. The Manuscript is so important to everything that it needs its own video. Long Live is a love letter to the fandom. Taylor has acknowledged lying to her fans. Taylor has acknowledged being deceptive. Taylor obviously realizes that the things that a lot of her fans believe about her songs, especially before TTPD came out, are not necessarily true. TTPD was really the first time that she really pushed forward the thought, hey, remember when I said I was an antithetical, people pleaser, all that jazz and midnights? Hey, what if I've been concealing a bunch of things for the past 10 years because of my career? What if I had a catastrophic emotional breakdown that I completely hid, at least one? Because she very often suggests that this is something that happened multiple times, where she broke down emotionally as a human being and was propped back up and primped back into her dresses and put back up on the stage and told to perform. Like, that is the whole purpose of the TTPD set, is to get people to understand that she has made that sacrifice for her audience. And unfortunately, there are still a tremendous number of people that are still only fixated on like the media story that is being portrayed. Oh, she was in love with Joe for 6 years, but also she was in love with Maddie for 10 years. And none of that stuff is nearly as important about what her art says about herself. And yes, sure, there are other romantic muses that are buried in her art, but also with so much talk of bait and switch and deception of lies, I don't know how much that is to also pacify the segment of the fandom who is definitely convinced that she's with a specific muse other than the big names that we know through the media. There are several other people that are commonly thought of as muses, and as somebody who in general does not really have a dog in the muse race, there is a lot of evidence for several different muses, and this feels like a deliberate attempt to keep people looking, because she knows that if people believe that she is telling these deep dark secrets about her relationships with these various muses, that people will continue to look in her work and will give her work a lot more investigation and credit and seriousness than if she says, hey, these songs are about me. And you can see that especially in the way the song Me is handled. Also in the way a lot of people didn't necessarily take The Man seriously, the way a lot of, critics didn't necessarily take folk more seriously, because oh, spoiling a rich girl. She definitely has been through a lot of bad things. You can be rich and still get put through the ringer of the fame machine, the celebrity industry. Taylor Swift is a product that has been marketed to us since she's been a child. That is not safe or comfortable for anyone, not even her. And absolutely, that is why so many of us feel that she is cracking the eggshell of, Taylor Swift, the brand. And realistically, the only thing that is remaining to be seen is this going to be something that she slowly steps away from over time and she gives people the chance to adjust to? Or is she just going to release a book, release a video, release something that is very specific and goes through all of the things, a complete autobiography? So many people, a great example, Elvira, so many people thought they knew everything about Elvira's life until she released her tell-all novel, when she finally decided that she was willing to accept the potential career ding that saying that she was in a relationship with a woman was going to have. Is Taylor going to immediately step out and say, hey, I have this book, this is the actual truth of my life, this is the truth of how I've used PR? Because I think one of the most interesting things to me as an observer of Taylor is just how she has utilized PR to keep her name in the headlines in the way she needs to keep them in the headlines, and also to protect herself from the media that in the early parts of her career was very savagely brutal to her. Like, she has really learned how to use that as a shield, and you can see as the people around her, especially the people that we call the Tay daughters, you know, the people like Sabrina, as they kind of step into the limelight more and show more and more of Taylor's behaviors, show that they have learned from her how to protect themselves personally and how to keep themselves in the headlines for the right reasons, how to keep people hooked on the grainy live screens for the art and for the stories they're trying to tell without being as feral and without attacking them as much for the things that they do that are human, for the things that they do that are failings. And the fact that she decided to lump New Year's Day in there has me thinking that maybe she is going to do this as like a big meet me at midnight New Year's some sort of release. I very much think we're getting karma. Like, everything that we have done recently is screaming karma. And if you're not a karma truther, if you're not a hardcore fan, a lot of people believe that in the interim between 1989 and Reputation, there was like a year and a half before her reputation was shattered. And she was very likely writing music during that year and a half, and that music was set aside when she decided to release Reputation. And that music would have been attached to her old record label. So until now, until this period of re-recordings, when she's legally able to re-release that music, she has not been able to touch it. A lot of us have believed that that was going to be something that was attached to Rep, that it was going to be like the vault tracks for Rep or something along those lines. I have also put forward the hypothesis that Reputation may be a double album, The Truth and the Lies, like with the truth being her story and her words, and the lies being the story that she, you know, the original Reputation album, the story that, you know, was given to the public to protect her in the aftermath of Reputation and this outing as a snake. And it definitely feels like one of these things that is linked up to her identity and cracking the shell and getting rid of Taylor TM, the brand, is the fact that it seems like a lot of people in the industry have hurt and used and manipulated her in a lot of ways. It seems very likely, based on a lot of the things that she has said in her songs, that bad things happened to her. It seems like the type of things that seem to possibly have happened to people like Justin Bieber and other people that were young and famous at that specific era. And it was especially difficult for Taylor because her first PR publicist had really given her this like angelic good girl next door image to try and sell her to the public. And nobody can really endure being that symbol of perfection, right? And it's very difficult to alter your reputation once you have that reputation. Even with everything that happened with Kim Ye and with Reputation era and with, you know, all of the things that have happened since then, Taylor is still very often held to a higher standard even than a lot of other female pop stars are, because especially a lot of her fans are associated with the church. They're very traditionalist people that have very traditionalist values, and if they feel that she goes against them, they're not going to be interested in her. And even like this idea that she may be in a relationship with multiple people, that she may be queer, like all of these things are things that would be no-goes for so many of her fans. And I think that, unfortunately, is why so many of these mashups that we have seen have had this element of her kind of seemingly saying goodbye. I think that she's absolutely trying to this, like, these songs are now yours. She's trying to get people to not associate those songs with the people, the men that they thought that those songs were associated with in the past, and to associate those times with themselves and their lives and the times that they've had with the Eras Tour, whether it be physically in person or whether it be over the live stream. And I think she's trying to do that as a way of trying to maintain as much as possible when she finally reveals who she is, what she cares about, all of those things. I think there are a lot of signs right now that she is taking steps to rid herself of these previous reputations and to come through and be her full, true, authentic self. And I'm very excited to see that. I also think that there's probably a lot that she is going to keep private. I think that she's going to be significantly more private with her relationships once she's being her full authentic self. And I think especially with what happened with Vienna and the threats and everything, I think it's been a very difficult year to kind of really understand just how much certain people have a very specific image of Taylor, will do very drastic things because of what they feel about her. Like, it is a weight of burden that I don't think any person should have on them. Like, every single thing Taylor does, she has to consider how many people are going to be impacted by it, even as a very small content creator. I think the most views I've ever gotten on one of my videos over here is maybe like 50 or 60,000. Like, even as a small content creator, it's very hard to conceive all of the harm I might do if I say something that is not true, but also specifically is very influential. Taylor seems to have a great understanding of how much influence she holds, but even still, I really worry. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so hard. Like, I think all of us know that we're on the cusp of something that's going to change a lot, that's going to change everything. Like, I think we all know that that is coming. Like, Taylor has been foreshadowing, hinting that a lot of things are going to change, and that not all of her fans are going to be able to come with and support her through that change. And that she has accepted that in her mind already, that part of the Eras Tour is saying goodbye to them, having one last hurrah with those people before she reveals the, you know, the magician, the wizard, the man behind, you know, the cloth. And I think that's why she's using so many of these metaphors so frequently. I've rambled one a lot. My videos are generally a lot more organized than this, but I really wanted to get just my feelings out in video form, especially because I have a lot of theories about what's going on and everything like that, and I'm kind of curious to see if I'm gonna be true. So we'll revisit this in like a year or so. God, I hope whatever's happening is happened within a year. God.